So one sort of stroller that we tend not to cover, but that we do get asked about from time to time, is stroller wagons. And since we recently put out a little video on Veer, who makes the cruiser, we thought we'd tackle the subject in its own video, going over what we see as the positives and negatives of wagon models in general, based on our experience in the workshop, as well as talking to patrons, and ending with a brief discussion of which uses and lifestyles they'll work for and which they won't. And starting off with the advantages then, the absolute primary positive of wagons is that they seem fun, being potentially more interactive for children due to the face-to-face seating, and providing a high-walled setting where you can scatter a bunch of toys on the play floor without fear of having to pause and pick them up every 5 steps. I would add here that they may also be fun just by their general design, which is a bit more like a boat or a carriage, but let's be honest, this may well have more to do with a parent's imagination than their kids'. The second advantage of wagons is their carrying capacity, which varies from model to model of course, but where in general, at least in terms of weight capacity, they tend to manage more than a regular stroller. Note here that this doesn't mean that there's necessarily more leg space for an older child though, especially if you're packing multiple kids in the wagon or planning to cart a lot of extra day trip gear as well. And also, that the heavier you load a wagon, the harder it will be naturally to maneuver. And the last positive worth mentioning about wagons then in my opinion is that a lot of models out there are relatively cheap, though I'd note here that other than very specific sorts of use, they're not, in my opinion, a proper alternative to having an actual stroller. Rather, they're more an extra piece of kit. Alright, let's move on to the negatives of wagons then, where, other than a select few pricier models, the first key negative is build quality. In particular with larger models that have accordion-style folds, like the Wonderfold, and where the bars and riveted connection points are just simply too thin and lacking reinforcement, leading to fiddly folding, rapid loosening, and often breaks. Secondly, most wagons, again excluding a few models such as the Veer Cruiser, are both pretty heavy and huge when folded, making them much more of a just around the neighborhood sort of thing for most people, except when overloading an SUV and heading out for an all-day trip somewhere where a wagon will be actually useful, which leads into negative number 3, that, despite claims by some producers of good terrain capability, with wagons, this generally means only that they have large enough wheels to get over bumpy ground, while they also, for the most part, lack shock absorption, which means the going can get really tough for both you and your kids. And in addition, they're also long, which makes them heavy to steer and tip, just like, though generally worse than, inline tandem strollers. And lastly, I'd note for the negatives that there are very few models with any sort of reclined position for the seat, or often even proper head support, which, for a model whose chief use outside of just getting around the neighborhood would be all-day outings, means things are apt to get pretty uncomfortable around nap time. All this being said, wagon strollers can have their uses, both for super flat suburban living, where you just want something to cart a lot of gear on foot to a local park, as well as, of course, if you need a bigger wagon to chauffeur more than 2 children at a time. But if we are only talking about 2 kids though, then I'd like to leave you with a similar, though in my opinion, better option to consider, namely chariots, which are also a bit too large for comfortable car use, yet similarly offer amazing carrying capacity while also being built stronger, being much more terrain capable and easier to maneuver, and having the added bonus of insulation against bad weather. In any case, we hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. In addition, if you're currently shopping for a stroller, we have a buyer's guide on our Patreon page which lists a wide range of models that we recommend, with a lot of technical and lifestyle related information. You can find it by following the links in the description. Thank you.